you very much for coming along once again. Today we're going to look at something that happened very recently, as in yesterday, all over the world, as it turns out, but principally for us in the United States and Washington, D.C., and in the major cities around the country. In Washington, D.C., we were treated to a major march all over the Capitol area and down Pennsylvania Avenue right to the White House. It was an extraordinary event and already captured by several of the news media, although we'll look in an interesting way as to how they cast the event in their coverage of the event. It wasn't uniformly dealt with as if it were an important event, even by some of the international reporters who are usually pretty good on these things. In particular, the BBC seems to have stumbled a bit on characterizing the event, and they're a major news outlet. But we're going to look today then at the whole question of what's been termed humanity's March for Sanity and Survival, the People's Climate March of 29 April 2017. It's in this vein we want to pick up some of the reporting that has been made available and refer you to the hours and hours of interviews and related material that you can already get access to through Transition Studies and other outlets available on the web. The date, 29 April, yesterday, 2017. The characterization of what was coming was rendered by an artist and used very quickly by The Nation magazine as a cover for The Nation's issue this last week. And the cover story of it was written by none other than Bill McKibben. On April 29, we march for the future, was the title of the article. We'll either save or doom the planet during the Trump administration. Don't sit the people's climate mobilization out, he urges everyone. And as a forceful writer and activist, he's been the one that's coordinated a lot of the gathering of different groups. But he's by no means the only person involved here. In fact, it's very impressive when you get into looking at who's involved. Hundreds of groups brought not just thousands of people, not just tens of thousands of people, but as it turns out, hundreds of thousands of people to the capital of the United States. The New York Times covered it with an article entitled "Climate March Draws Thousands of Protesters Alarmed by Trump's Environmental Agenda." Notice they use just the word thousands, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, just thousands. And it's perhaps for this reason, too, that the BBC's headline was "Anti-Trump Climate Change March Draws Thousands in U.S." Well, it's a very interesting characterization of it. This was actually this morning's headline. This morning in America, remember, is 5 hours after it is in Britain, so it could have been last night's here, but the characterization of it as an anti-Trump climate change march is problematic, because the issue isn't just with Trump, it's with the entire approach of the entire United States. And it's not, again, not just thousands, not just tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands of people that are showing up in one city. Now, if you calculated the other tens of thousands in other cities across the United States, it'd be very easy to realize that we're in the realm of hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in total. As the Real News Network covered it, they at least put the honest number of 200,000 rally for climate justice in D.C. At this point, it's for a principle, climate justice. It's not a person, This isn't looking at Donald Trump and his deficiencies of learning or incapacity to understand basic science. We're looking at climate justice issues between the United States and the rest of the world. And of course, it occurred elsewhere in the world. You have only to look through some of the social media to realize that there are marches on in Amsterdam as well as across the United States in rather snowy conditions. In Denver it was snowy. While in Washington, D.C. it was the hottest April 29th, it was anticipated, the hottest April 29th in recorded history for Washington, D.C. In Denver they're still getting snow and wintry storm conditions. But as one of the Denver demonstrators pointed out, we're living on this planet as if we have a backup, as if in some sense there's a planet B that we can all move to. This is an indication of the scale of fantasy of those who are in power and doing nothing at this point. Not only doing nothing, they're actually pursuing policies that aggravate climate change, make it worse. It wasn't just in Denver and Washington, D.C., but all over the country. And here you have an invitation to join the L.A. Harbor March, which is actually a very dramatic one that took place in Los Angeles. But it was Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! That carried a special broadcast for 5 hours from Washington, D.C., from 10 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon. It was really quite impressive journalistic achievement on her part and that of her entire team. They began to interview everybody, and in particular the organizers, like May Bove. Take a look.
I wanted to start going to May Bove. May is the head of 350.org, one of the main organizations that is running this event. Hi, May.
Hi, Amy. Good morning.
So you are standing here between the Capitol and the Washington Monument. Your thoughts on this day and why so many people are gathered?
It's a really important day today. It's the 100th day of the Trump administration, and we've seen nothing but bad news for people and for the planet, and that's why so many people are going to come.
Who came up with this?
Well, that's what's wonderful about today, is that this is truly a coming together of labor, health groups, faith groups, environmentalists, community groups. Over 900 organizations are making this happen. And
now that's pretty extraordinary when you think of it. 900 organizations. It's hard to make a list. Well, it would be hard to make a list, and it's forever growing. 900 organizations together forming a march from the Capitol down Pennsylvania Avenue, encircling the White House. 900 organizations. You just don't get that kind of turnout for casual events.
we're here to show that to change everything, we need everyone. And so that is why we will see numerous people on the streets today.
So talk about the schedule of the day.
So people are starting to gather right now. We're going to assemble in different contingents, ranging from a fossil fuel contingent. The front lines will lead off the march. Youth will be in the front of the march, and then we're going to march through the Capitol, and we're going to surround the White House, and we'll all sit down there. We'll have a moment of silence, a moment of noise, and exaltation of why we're all here to resist. And then we're going to go back to our communities and fight hard there, because we know that what's happening in Washington is not good for any of us, but we can actually build what we need at the local level, and that is what people are going to do.
Now, people are not only converging on Washington. How many protests and rallies do you expect throughout the country and the world?
Last I heard, there's over 300 just around the U.S. in terms of sister marches. This morning I saw photos from the marches in Sweden, in the Netherlands, in the Philippines. People are marching for clean energy, to stop coal plants, to divest. It's really, truly global, as all of these incredible demonstrations have been. This resistance is not just about the White House. It's about the fossil fuel industry taking over governments around the world. But people are not taking this quietly.
So you talked about the fossil fuel contingent. What do you mean?
That's a group of where people from all over the country who are fighting fracking and pipelines, tar sands, are going to be marching together, just like there's a faith contingent.
Just 1 second. There's someone who's taking your picture secretly, and I'd like him to take responsibility for his act. Okay, Bill McKibben, you just photobombed this interview, and we're interested in what you have to say for yourself. Why are you here today, standing right in front of the Capitol?
Look, this is a big day and going to be an interesting one. Washington, D.C. is going to set a heat record today for the date. It's supposed to be 92 degrees. Like planets, people aren't well adapted to heat, especially this early in the season. People got to be really careful today. So people who are watching this, who are coming out to march, water, hats. We worry about warming up because too much heat's a bad thing, and today's that's true today too.
Lest anyone think this is a group of friends, everyone knows each other. It's clear it's not the case. People are coming from every community. You just talked about water bill. Sharon Day is here, who led the water ceremony this morning. Can you talk, Sharon, about how you started this historic day in Washington, D.C.?
Well, we started the way Indigenous people begin everything, with prayer, with song, with petitions for the water. And so in this copper water vessel, we have water from the Potomac, and people brought water from the East Coast, the West Coast, the middle of the country, as well as water from South America. And so we prayed for this water this morning. We'll carry it with us during the march. And
where is this water from?
This water is from all across the United States, as well as South America. And everybody brought a little bit of water, and we have it in here. And so, what we do is we speak to the spirit of the water. And we're going to carry this water with us. And when we take it and we put it back into the Potomac River, these waters, they will confer with each other, and they will say there are still people who love you, who respect you, and who thank you. And so that's what we did this morning. We sang, we offered our sema, and so we're here to bring that spiritual aspect to this work, because Indigenous communities are on the front line. And
where are you from originally?
Myself, Boisfort Band of Ojibwe, Minnesota.
And where do you live now?
I live in St. Paul.
So, Bill, you were talking about the heat. 350.org, tell us about where you got its name and the significance of that number changing.
And this actually goes very well to what Sharon was just saying. One of the things that's happening is a kind of confluence of the oldest wisdom traditions on our planet and the newest wisdom traditions on our planet. They're saying the same things now. So 350 parts per million is the most carbon we could safely have in the atmosphere. As you know, we went past 410 parts per million earlier this week for the first time in at least 5 million years on this planet, okay? What that's telling us is exactly the same thing that what Sharon and her elders have been saying for a very long time. Things are out of control. We need to back off and figure out how to live in some kind of attunement with the planet around us. That we're not is evidenced by the fact that the ice caps are melting. It's evidenced by, we think it's going to be hot here today. In Pakistan this week, they're breaking all their temperature records, 122 degrees in the big cities of Pakistan. As we're marching out here in the 92-degree heat and feeling hot, we need to try and remember what it would feel like to be 30 degrees hotter still, That's what's happening on this earth now.
Okay, well, Bill gives a very useful encapsulation there of both the old and the newer evidence. And others show up as well, and Amy pounces right on them. In this case, the lawyers who are suing the U.S. government and who are up against now straightforward opposition from the current administration. Maura Healey came from Massachusetts.
This is Democracy Now! We're broadcasting live from the People's Climate March. I'm Amy Goodman. We're in the nation's capital. It's expected to be one of the hottest April 29th in history. history here in Washington, D.C. Right now, I'm joined by Maura Healey. She is the Attorney General of Massachusetts. Welcome to Democracy
Hey,
Now!
it's great to be here, Amy. Great to be here today. I'm looking around at all these people. It's so important, and I'm just so happy to be down here on the mall part of it.
Why are you here?
Well, you know, climate change is, I think, the most important issue of our time, and I think about the work that we're doing as a state on the front lines to really hold the Trump administration accountable. And my message today to the president, to Scott Pruitt, and anybody else in the administration is we have come too far. We cannot go backwards. This is about a president who seems set on dismantling important protections that have been put in place, important achievements. We're on the right road. We have a lot more work to do. But as a state attorney general, I'm going to be there to protect our planet, to protect our residents. This is also a matter of economic interest. You know, in the Northeast, in Massachusetts in particular, Amy, we've seen the benefits of lowering carbon emissions. We've seen the benefits of growing a clean tech, clean economy, a clean environmental economy. And this is about not just protecting our planet, protecting our economy as well. And that's why I'm here today.
Now, along with Eric Schneiderman, the Attorney General of New York State, you're one of the pioneers in taking on the largest private oil corporation in the world, ExxonMobil, whose CEO now happens to be, former CEO, head of the State Department, our Secretary of State. Can you talk about what you're doing with ExxonMobil?
Well, it was just a year ago when we sent subpoenas to Exxon to ask them a simple question. Tell us what you knew when about climate change and the impact that burning fossil fuels was going to have on the environment. Because based on widely reported, publicly available information, we had concern that Exxon may not have told the truth to the public, to consumers, to its shareholders about what it knew.
Okay, and they sued for access to Exxon's documents. The former CEO of Exxon is now Secretary of State, and there's a huge battle between him, ExxonMobil itself, and the state's attorneys general, like Maura Healey from Massachusetts, and the state attorney general from New York. Different senators showed up and gave talks and speeches, and in particular, in Massachusetts, this case, our senior senator made an appeal. Take a look.
The next speaker is a co-sponsor of 100 by 50. He's been fighting to take action on climate change for 40 years. He knows all the details, educates us continuously. He's a force in the House, he's a force in the Senate. Ed Markey of Massachusetts.
Thank you, Jeff Merkley, Sheldon Lighthouse, to Maria Cantwell, and to Tom Cabra, the ranking member on the Environment Committee. Maria is the ranking member on the Energy Committee. Nydia Velasquez, and a great Congresswoman from New York, and our great Attorney General from Massachusetts, Maura Healey, who is here today as well, who you will be hearing in just a minute. So thank you all so much for being here. When people were unhappy with slavery, the abolitionist movement came here and stood here to say no, that they wanted a revolution. When women wanted to have the right to vote, the suffragettes came here, where we are standing, to say that that must change.
And he goes on to point out this is what's happening now with climate sensitive people all over the country. And he warns the president about his own obituary. Very interesting phrase. Take a look.
I guess Donald Trump should worry about what his obituary says. And if in 20 or 25 years we have catastrophic storms, ice caps melting, millions of people endangered all across this planet, and he stood on the sidelines and made that kind of a catastrophe possible, that is all that he is going to be remembered for. If he wants to go down as a great man, he has to take on the greatest challenge of our generation, and right now, he's just walking away from that fight.
So this 100 days, in the last few days, he's issued a number of executive orders, including opening up public lands to drilling, from offshore drilling to the Arctic. Do these executive orders have power? Is he dismantling the regulatory state? Is he succeeding?
Each one of those executive orders will be taken to court by the Attorney General, by the Sierra Club, by NRDC. They're in for a huge historic legal battle right up to the Supreme Court.
Okay, well, this is the gauntlet that's been laid down by the senators, and Bill was interviewed at several points by different sources. You should catch up on these, and other personalities have been notable. This is the son of Jacques Cousteau, the great discoverer and spokesman for ocean livelihoods. His son, Jean-Michel, shows up as a protector of the oceans. Very interesting idea, not as an American citizen, but as protector of the oceans. And Kumi Naidoo comes as well.
I'm Nermeen Sheikh, here in Washington, D.C. At the People's Climate March. And I'm joined now by the former president of Greenpeace, Kumi Naidoo. Kumi, now you're with the organization Africans Rising. Explain why you think it's important to be here at the People's Climate March.
Well, Africans Rising for Justice, Peace and Dignity is a new African-wide social movement that is extremely concerned about the fact that right now we are already experiencing the first and the most brutal impacts of climate change. We think it's a terrible injustice that even though the people of Africa collectively contributed the least to emissions, we are the ones that are paying the first and most brutal price, where we've got climate refugees, land that's drying up, water sources that are disappearing and so on, which is already creating quite a catastrophic situation. We feel extremely hurt that in fact the countries that carry the biggest responsibility continue to deny their responsibility, but also continue to deny the very fact that the science is absolutely clear that we have to get off dirty energy. So we're here to just bring a voice to say to the people of the United States to continue to put pressure on their governments, to recognize that if we continue on the path that we are, that when history is recorded, the United States will go down as a country that have the greatest power to avert catastrophic climate change, but abuse that power and carry the biggest responsibility for the crisis that we are currently heading towards. And people must be very clear. We are 5 minutes to midnight in terms of the amount of time we have to reverse things. It still can be done, but we need political will and we need Trump and Trump's policies to be resisted extremely strongly.
Well, can you talk about some of the concerns you have about the Trump administration and the number of climate deniers in his White House?
Well, firstly, you know, climate change offers us an opportunity. Because far too long we've lived in a world between North and South, developing, rich and poor. Climate change should bring us to our sense that we get this right as rich and poor countries acting together, and we can actually secure the future of all our children. Right now, when Trump talks about the wall, for example, we would like to remind him from my African perspective that if you put a wall around Africa, the whole world will go out of business. People won't be able to use cell phones and so on. So we need to break away from the idea that addressing climate change should be about advantage and competition.
He goes on to clarify it in much more graphic terms. Take a look.
Will still be here. The truth is, be said, if we become extinct as a species, the oceans will recover, the forests will replenish and so on. So understand that the struggle that we are engaged in is whether humanity can fashion a way to coexist with nature in a mutually interdependent relationship for centuries to come. And put differently, this struggle is fundamentally about securing our children and their children's futures. And therefore, opportunities like this for parents and grandparents and people who are planning to be parents to come out and say, not in my name, is important. But let's be very honest, we're going to need about 1,000 of these kinds of marches on an ongoing basis if we are going to be able to wrestle power from and to have the kind of policy, Trump must recognize that denialism is not a policy.
Denialism is not a policy, and it's certainly not a survivable one. Things which Naomi Klein pointed out, she's familiar to us here in Cambridge, having spoken at the forum with her book, This Changes Everything. Noam Chomsky also is invoked in this. We basically need new kinds of citizen scientist alliances to make a transition to a sustainable future.